you. All right. Well, thank you for that warm welcome, and thank you for all for coming out today for this presentation. I hope you'll find it helpful and interesting as you move on to your life after Maryland. Just curious, how many of you are master's students? Okay. How many PhD students? Okay. And how many people are graduating in May? Okay. So a good mix of you. One last question. How many of you can hear me in the back? Can everyone hear me? Okay, I don't usually project that well, but I'm going to try to project more for the purposes of this presentation. So as Julie said, I work in the University Career Center in the President's Promise, and I hope if you haven't taken advantage of our services, you'll really consider coming over to our office. We're located in Hornbeck Library in the South Wing. If we have any business or engineering students in here, or public policy, you have your own career centers housed within your schools, and you can go to them for individual career counseling. But keep in mind, you can always come to all of our events, our career fairs, our panels, and use Careers for Terps, which I may show you a little bit at the end as well. So sometimes people don't understand that even though you're in one of those other schools, you can still come to all of our events. If you're not a business, engineering, or public policy student, know that our center is your career counseling center. So you can set up one-on-one career counseling appointments with program directors like myself in the office for any questions, concerns you might have regarding your job search and what comes next. So just to go ahead and jump in, I always like to put this slide up first to kind of show where what we're talking to fits into the job search process, because it really is a process, and it's hard to jump into the job search piece if you haven't done the preliminary work. So the first step in the process really is self-assessment. What are your skills, values, and interests? I show this a lot with undergraduate students, and by being in grad school, you're already a lot farther along in the process. But I know even if you're in a graduate program, there's a lot of self-assessment that you can do within that program. There are different aspects of your field, and even within that, there's the idea, do you want to work in the private sector, nonprofit, or government sector? So you have to kind of weigh those options as well. Self-assessment comes first, then exploring the career options. And again, you're a lot farther along than a lot of the undergraduate students I work with, but still the need to explore career options is out there. Gaining experience, I guarantee through most of your graduate programs, maybe you're doing internships, research assistant positions, teaching assistant positions, you're gaining that experience. It's a critical part in the process because that's what you're going to talk about in the interviews, as we're going to discuss today. And job search is the last step in the process. So I really encourage you, if you feel weak in any of these first three steps of the process, don't hesitate to go to your career center, whether it's the University Career Center in the President's Promise or the one perhaps housed in whichever school you might be in, to work on those. It's just going to make your job search easier if you've done that preliminary work. Okay, so jumping into today's topic, which is interviewing. Some ways to prepare for the interview. I can't stress enough how important it is to research the employer and organization before an interview, especially when you make it to the graduate level. A lot of the feedback I get, and I know what I've seen myself going on interviews for jobs that require a graduate degree, is it's much more focused on you providing the questions. That's not to say that they're not going to have questions for you, but they're going to expect you to come with a really solid, well thought out list of questions to ask them during the interview. In a lot of cases, depending on where you're interviewing, you're probably going to be interviewing with multiple people. You know, if you're interviewing at a college, you're going to be interviewing with faculty, staff, and students, all these different stakeholders. So you want to think of different questions for the different types of people that you might meet. So that really goes into some of the preparation that you're doing for an interview. And then the obvious things like knowing where you're going and knowing how you're going to get there. That sounds so basic, but especially in this area, in the Washington, D.C. area, going somewhere at 3 p.m. is a lot different than going somewhere at 5 p.m. because of rush hour traffic and parking, and you don't want to show up late for an interview. You want to be 10 or so minutes early to the interview, so don't make a dumb mistake and not work that stuff out ahead of time. So figure out where you're going and how you're going to park and all that good stuff. So along the lines of questions to ask the interviewer, as you're doing your research, you know, using company websites and things like that, hopefully some questions will come to mind. But again, some possible topics that are always good questions for them revolve around training, professional development, current events in the field, things to show that you've been really kind of keeping current with what's going on in your industry, your field. They love to hear you ask about opportunities for advancement to show that you're committed to staying with that organization and growing and developing with them. Sometimes you want clarification on major responsibilities of the job. And get creative. Again, as you're doing your research, hopefully questions will come out here. And again, think about different groups of people you might be meeting with during the interview. I know when I interviewed here just this past August, so I'm pretty fresh off the interview process here, I met with faculty, staff, and students. And within the faculty staff category, several different types of meetings too. And they told me that ahead of time, so I was able to come in prepared with questions that were tailored to each group. So think about how you might be able to do that ahead of time. So what are employers looking for? And I know this is a little small and hard to see, but basically employers are asked every year by the National Association of Colleges and Employers, what are the top skills that you're looking for? And it's always kind of surprising how subject matter expertise often is not something that's immediately at the top of their list. Now, for some fields out there, that may not completely be the case, but overall employers are saying they value communication verbal skills, number one, work ethic, teamwork, analytical skills, initiative, problem solving, these types of soft skills that are really demonstrated by interview questions, like we're going to tackle in just a little bit. So you really want to think about how the examples you give are conveying your ability to demonstrate this type of thing. And with communication skills, especially verbal skills at the top of the list, that's why an interview is really important, because they're looking for someone who can really communicate effectively and showcase what they have to offer. Okay, so some questions to ask yourself before the big interview. Why should they hire me? It's a basic question, but what makes you unique? Obviously we're in a tight job market, not an impossible job market by any means, but a tighter one. And there are going to be multiple candidates for this position, but by the time you get to a final interview, you've catapulted past probably hundreds of people. It's down to maybe 3 to 5 people. You've got to feel good about that. So you just want to think about what's going to make you stand out from those other 3 or 4 people. What makes you unique in this specific position? What are you looking for in the employer in the position too? Because yes, this job market is tight, but it's still a two-way street. You've been in school a long time. You don't want to accept a job where it's not going to be a good fit. I think all of us have been in a job before that wasn't 100% right. You're just not going to do your best work and you're not going to thrive. What particularly about this position and employer appeals to me? Because again, you're going to really talk about this in the interview and show them that that's why you've applied to this specific employer. For example, when I interviewed here, I was able to say that this position, specific position appealed to me because it was working with students in the College of Arts and Humanities. I went to a liberal arts college myself. I worked at liberal arts college before this, and so coming in here working with the College of Arts and Humanities was a perfect fit. So I was able to really say that over and over again in the interview to drive that point home. And finally, so what are some of the goals of the organization or industry, and how do your specific skills fit with those trends? I talk a lot about this with undergrads that I work with, but I think it would fit for a lot of grad students too. Sometimes an advantage of being a slightly younger student is that you have your finger on the pulse of technology, and you're okay with social media, and you're not intimidated by computers and technology. That's just one example, but think about how your specific skills can contribute to trends in the industry that you're going into. Questions to be prepared for. So as I said before, in interviews, it's going to be important for you to bring a lot of questions, but they're also going to have a lot of questions for you. It really is a two-way street. There are tons and tons of general types of questions you can get. Towards the end of this program, I'm going to show you a tool we have on our website that has 1,500 interview questions you could choose from to practice. General questions, the most common or the hot questions, all the way down to your specialty industries. So we'll kind of come back to this a little bit at the end, but I really want to focus on some of the ones that you submitted, because I really want to thank everyone for answering the pre-test questions. Loved the questions you got. And actually the first 2, I polled people in my office because they were ones that students actually hadn't brought to my attention before. It kind of stumped me for a little bit. So I polled other career counselors in our office, and we got the consensus on what we would recommend doing. So these are actual questions from the audience that people submitted. First 2 being, can you commit to this position if we offered it to you today, with the premise being this is not your ideal job? What do you do? Okay, so this one I would say you want to say something to the effect of, I would only, interview with an organization or position that interests me greatly, and I really thank you for the opportunity to be here today. As with any major life decision, I would want to take an appropriate amount of time to think about it, but I can assure you I'd only interview for a position that I would, be strongly interested in. So you're answering it, but not saying, yes, I would say yes today. But I thought those were, and the second one was right along those lines. Tell me about yourself. That was another one someone submitted. Really glad someone submitted it, because almost every professional interview you're in, this will probably be the first question or something along this line. So tell me about yourself. They want a professional snapshot of yourself. They don't want to know that you're one of 10 kids and you have 5 cats and you love to crochet. No. They want your professional snapshot. So they want to know that you're a PhD student at the University of Maryland, studying English. You're passionate about creative writing. You've done an internship with a magazine, and on campus you've been a TA. And you're interested in this organization because blank. Oh, I'm sorry. Because X, Y, and Z, showing you've done your research. Usually 30 to 60 seconds for the response. This type of thing should be very similar to what you say when you go to a career fair. When you walk up to that table, that's what they're looking for, is to tell me about yourself. We call it your elevator speech, your personal commercial. So this is something you can really practice and get really comfortable with it. So you're going to start that interview off on a strong hook. And this is something, again, you can customize a little bit depending on the position. So when I interviewed here, my answer was very tailored for the liberal arts. I really played up my connection to the liberal arts. When I interviewed at another university and the position wasn't focused on the liberal arts, I tailored it in another way. I talked about my study abroad experience and my experience traveling to other countries. So you can tailor this one just a little bit. Do you have any questions for me? So yeah, we talked about that a little bit already, so you always want to have questions for them. If this is coming at the end of the interview, you typically want to have at least 2 or 3 good questions. But again, with graduate level positions, and I can't say this is true across all fields, but often the question and answer is going to be kind of a give and take throughout the interview. So bring more than enough questions, especially those of you who are going into an academic job search. I know with our pretest, the majority of you were going non-academic, but for those of you who are going academic job search, you want to have pages and pages of questions, because these are going to be 1 to 2 day interview events that you're looking for. And again, types of questions could be across the board, and think about the different groups of people you're going to be talking to. Usually for an interview, they're going to give you a heads up ahead of time. This is the general schedule for the day. Here are the types of people, possibly even the names of people you're going to be talking to. And then you can go out and do a little research online, maybe on LinkedIn, some other sites, for some targeted questions to ask them. Okay, what can you do for us that other candidates cannot? Again, this is a marketing type question. Think about what you can do that's unique. Think about, okay, yeah, you've been in this master's program and you have maybe this same degree that a lot of people have, but as part of your degree, you wrote a research paper on this, or you did a research project on this. Or think back to your college days, because sometimes, yeah, you've got this master's degree or this PhD, but your bachelor's degree was in something a little bit different, and that makes you a really unique candidate. So again, think about what you might be able to pull out that makes you unique, and stand out from the pack. Now, I would try to do something that's more concrete than I'm a hard worker, I'm a team player, because everyone's going to say that. Think about something tangible that you could use an example for. What did you like least about your last position? This falls into the type of category of negative questions. So, and the weakness question that everyone dreads. You don't want to get sucked into talking really badly about a past supervisor or coworker. I would pick something that, wasn't a huge part of your last job. Maybe it was just something that is kind of a side project you had to work on. Or you can pick something that was really out of your control. I got this question in my interview, and I said, the thing I liked least about my last position was actually that I was in a 2-person office, and the director of my office had to go out on very unexpected medical leave for 4 months. She almost had a major heart failure. With no warning, we had no time to plan the transition, and for 4 months I was in our office. And it was a really challenging yet rewarding time, because I was really able to step up to the plate. So looking back, it was a really hard 4 months, but I learned a lot from it. I think that answers it without putting myself in a negative light or putting myself in a bad place answering it. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? That's one you'll get quite a lot, and people struggle with, well, how am I supposed to know what I'm going to be doing 10 years down the road? And they don't expect you to have a crystal ball and know where you're going to be in 10 years. What they want to see is your commitment to the industry and hopefully their commitment to their organization. Again, if you're not there in 10 years, they're not going to go hunt you down and say, you said you'd be here 10 years from now. No, you just want to say, if I were lucky enough to be offered this position, I would hope that I'd be in a position where I could be growing and developing in a career with your organization. I think that gets the point across. And then you could even kind of turn it back on them and say, if I were fortunate enough to be here in 10 years, what would be some opportunities I could have in this organization? Again, question for them. Have you ever had to ask for help? Give us an example. This kind of goes along with what did you like least about your last position. Pick something where it wasn't you had to ask for help because you were there was a skill that you didn't have, but maybe it was a situation where you wanted to learn and grow. Maybe you saw the opportunity to do some work with a faculty member or a professor because it was something you'd never done before, and you had to ask for help because it was new to you. But again, it was something showing your motivation to grow and learn rather than you just didn't know how to do X, Y, or Z. And then this last one I really liked. So why does a PhD student want to teach in K-12? So the idea of maybe you're applying for a position and you're slightly overqualified for it. Again, I think you want to tackle this by looking at what makes you unique and not focusing on the fact that you're overqualified, because they're looking for you to get sucked into talking about why you're overqualified. So I would say, I want to teach in K-12 because from my research I did with a such and such professor, I learned that I'm passionate about working with children, and I think working in K-12 is the way to change society and change the face of education. I can't do it in any other way other than teaching in K-12. So answer in a really positive, affirmative way. Don't get sucked into talking about your qualifications. So thank you so much for submitting these questions. And again, I'll show you where you can access tons of other common questions, but I liked these because these were really tough ones that I think encapsulate a lot of the challenging categories that you might face in an interview. Okay, but the other type of questions that you can get in an interview that people tend to really worry about, and I think if you've prepared for them, they're not that hard. They're actually kind of easy if you've prepared. They're behavioral-based questions, and they tend to start out with the first phrase, tell me about a time when you. And if you haven't prepared, you hear that and you go, oh no, not one of those. But if you've prepared, you're good to go. So tell me about a time you made a tough decision. Tell me about a time you worked successfully on a team. Tell me about a time you made a mistake. And the best way to solve them or to answer them is the STAR method. So the situation, task, action, and result. So walk them through what the situation was. So let's take the example of, tell me about a time you had to solve a challenging problem with a creative solution. Okay, so if I were going to answer this, I would say the situation was, it was last week actually. It was Career Fair week. We were so busy in our office, multiple events going on with tons and tons of people signed up for them. And a student emailed me needing help with an appointment, and there's just literally no room in my schedule. Even if I tried, I could not fit the student in. But this was a student I worked with before, and I really cared about her succeeding and finding this internship she was looking for. And so as a result, I emailed her back and I said, I don't see room in my schedule to meet face-to-face, but let's try to schedule in a 10-minute phone conversation. I've carved out this spot of time, and let's make this happen on the phone. The result was we were able to talk on the phone for 10 minutes, got her questions resolved, and hopefully if I was telling this down the road, the result would be she secured the internship that we were talking about. I can't say that yet because it hasn't happened. But the most important part is the result. And that's the part that most people forget to do. They talk about the situation, task, and action. They don't talk about the positive outcome. And that's really what you're focusing on. Some of these, you're talking about a negative situation. Tell me about a time you made a mistake. Tell me about a time you made an unpopular decision. And if you leave off the result, you're leaving a negative impression in the interviewer's mind. So really make sure you hit on the result. And you want to think about your interview responses. So typically research has shown interview responses should be between 20 seconds and 2 minutes in length. Now 20 seconds is going to be for kind of that short, tell me about yourself type of question. 2 minutes is going to be more for something like this. You might go a little bit over for something like this. But don't sell yourself short by skimping on the details to get through this type of question quickly. The good news is there are usually a lot of examples that you can pull from that would answer several of these questions. Like if you can think of probably 8 to 10 examples from experiences you've had on campus, internships, class projects, you can probably in a pinch pull from them to answer a variety of behavioral research, behavioral interviewing type questions. So really encourage you to keep practicing these. And again, I'm going to show you a tool you can use on your own, or you can set up a mock interview in our office or in the Career Center that goes with your graduate program. These types of questions, with practice, you're going to be confident and you're going to do a great job in the interview. Something else I didn't mention that I would add in interview questions, like on your resume, anytime you can be really specific and quantify, it really goes a long way. So I don't know if some of these answers you were talking about groups of people or maybe things that you did that increased sales or increased attendance. Actually showing numbers and quantifying goes a long way. Or maybe if we have some education students out there, talking about the specific ages of the students you work with, the numbers in your classroom, that really goes a long way. Okay. So it's the day of the interview. So you've done all this research, you've practiced your interview questions. Some of the things you want to do to be successful. First of all, you obviously want to dress to impress. And I would say you really want to wear a complete suit. You know, there are a lot of fields where you'll probably never wear a suit again. But even if your recruiter or the person interviewing you isn't wearing a suit, I would do it. Just going to look professional. Especially coming through a graduate program, they're expecting that extra level of professionalism. And the one step up philosophy. You want to dress for the job that you want to have, right? I definitely want to be on time, and really being on time means I would say being about 10 to 15 minutes early. I wouldn't be an hour early. If you're that early, you're going to probably inconvenience the interviewer. They're going to try to take you early, and it's going to be a mess. So 10 to 15 minutes early. If you're earlier than that, hang out in a coffee shop nearby, hang out in your car, bring something to read, something, you know, educational looking, the newspaper, or your notes or your resume that you've brought with you. Obviously know where you're going, who you're meeting with, simple things like handshakes, smile, eye contact, being aware of any cultural differences that might exist. But you know, you want to give everyone a good firm handshake, look them in the eye, male and female. And just be friendly and smile and show that enthusiasm. Okay, types of interviews that you might face. So typically there's going to be an initial screening interview. This does vary across industries. You know, some fields the initial screening is going to be a phone interview, might be an on-campus interview. Sometimes it's at a career fair. They're all just different ways that they're going to screen you. Then typically there's the second interview that's going to be more in depth. Usually behavioral type interview. Some of the types of questions we just looked at. Sometimes you have to give a presentation. I had to give like a half an hour presentation here. I've also been in interviews where I had to do like a mock career counseling session. Academic job search, you're probably going to be giving some sort of job talk to a group of students. For some of you, if you have more technical majors in here, you might have to actually solve some sort of problem. Sometimes they could be group-based, where you're solving a problem or working on a project with others to see how you interact, kind of like a grad school interview in some cases. But they'll give you the heads up usually on what you'll be doing ahead of time, so you can kind of mentally prepare for what you're facing. Or if it's a presentation, it's going to be something you need to get ready ahead of time. I really want to start with phone interviews, because that is a pretty common screening tool nowadays. And I think phone interviews are pretty challenging. There's some pros and cons to phone interviews. You do still want to practice for a phone interview. You want to take it very seriously. This is still an interview. The thing I really like about phone interviews is you can have notes in front of you. And yeah, you can have notes in an interview in person, but you have to be more sneaky about it. Where the phone interview, you can have that full cheat sheet in front of you. You can write down everyone they told you you're going to be interviewing with. You can have all your stats about their company or their organization in front of you. And all your questions. And you have a resume in front of you. You want to have a pen, paper, maybe even a calendar in case you're lucky enough they say, let's go ahead and schedule that next interview. You won't have to hesitate. The calendar is right there in front of you. You want to warm up your voice. Sometimes people recommend standing. I don't think you necessarily have to stand, but I'd sit at a desk. You know, you don't want to lie in your bed. You don't want to be lounging around. You want to be in professional mode even though you're probably at home. You obviously don't want to have the TV or radio on. You want to put a do not disturb sign on your door. If you have a pet, think about putting them in another room. I was on a phone interview and my dog actually started barking, even though I had him in another room. So things like that. You don't want to be driving. Recruiters tell us all the time they get people on phone interviews who are multitasking and it's gone awry. I know it's hard with cell phones, but if there's any way you can have a call not beep through, and check your voicemail message. You know, is it appropriate? So if they miss you, are they going to get a nice professional sounding voicemail message? And sometimes, you know, if at all possible to use a landline, that's ideal. I know a lot of us nowadays don't have landlines, so sometimes you've got to do a cell phone. But you might just want to say to them, if we get disconnected, I'll call you back, or have a plan in place. And how many of you have had a phone interview before? A lot of you, okay. So it can be really challenging, especially when there are like 6 people on the phone interview. Maybe it's a conference call, speakerphone. It can be a little bit hard to hear, you know, and I think sometimes it can be hard for them to hear you too. So maybe speak a little bit more slowly than usual. Don't be afraid to say, could you repeat that? I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you. So just kind of be ready for that. But again, I think pen, paper, take good notes as that's going on. Okay. References, we get a lot of questions on this. So a lot of times, if they haven't asked for a list of references ahead of time, I would go ahead and bring that to the in-person interview. Sometimes that will be part of the application document, but not always. So just have a nice sheet of paper with the references listed, you know, name, title, organization, address, email, phone, space down the page. Otherwise, you can say, I'll contact you the next day with the reference information. I'd say just bring it to the interview and you look extra prepared. Giving them something they haven't even asked for yet. Another thing I would say you could do is you could go ahead and solicit recommendation letters that are just kind of general, maybe from your past supervisors. I did this myself, and there were 2 letters from my past supervisors. Again, I gave them the list of references here, but at the end of the interview, I was able to say, I actually have 2 letters from my past supervisors. I don't know if you'd be interested, but I'd be happy to leave them with you today. So, you know, it's just something extra for them to read while they were deciding who they wanted to pick. So I don't think it hurts to solicit them. And they can say, to whom it may concern, or dear hiring manager, if you have a close relationship with someone you've worked with before. Otherwise, it's just a reference list. Yes?
Do you have suggestions on how to format this reference list? Is it like 3 people, 1 from professional, 1 from personal?
Great question. Yeah, I would say, and again, it depends on the industry or the organization you're applying to. I mean, if this is an academic job search, I'd really have it be faculty members you've worked with. For more non-academic, private industry, nonprofit, government organization, I have a nice mix. Faculty, maybe past work supervisor, but really you want to pick the people who know you the best. You don't want to just put that like rock star faculty member because they have name recognition, but they're not going to be able to talk that well about you. People who really know your abilities and your unique skills. And you want to talk to them ahead of time and say, would you be willing to serve as a reference? I'm going on the job search. Maybe even set up a one-on-one time with them so you can kind of brief them on the types of jobs you're applying for. Maybe give them your resume ahead of time so they can really speak more effectively about your background. And then keep them up to date. So you can say, I had an interview, I think it went well, my fingers are crossed. Hopefully you'll be hearing from John Smith next week. I know that's been really helpful when I've been a reference for someone else. And then I've always tried to keep people in the loop when I'm job searching. So, great. Yes? Mm-hmm.
We have a reference letter from somebody that forward to attach that reference letter with application.
Great question. Yeah, I think you definitely could. You know, I've done that myself. Sometimes online applications will have like a supplemental document section. Sure, go ahead and put that reference letter on there. And then if they don't have that spot, you could bring it to the interview, or you could still bring a copy and just say, I don't know if you saw the reference letter attached to my application, I printed off one for you. Again, you don't have to do that, but it's just kind of, if you have the time and the relationship with someone, I think it can be an extra point in your favor. Great questions. Okay, any other general interview questions before we move on to salary negotiation? Yes? Mm-hmm.
One, the person at the other end wouldn't or didn't want to turn their video on, or I couldn't see anybody in the video but they can see me. Is it appropriate for me to ask them to be visible, or is that just weird?
That's tricky. I guess I would ask once, and if they're really resistant to it, I would just roll with the punches. But I would just say, no, I don't see you. I don't see your image coming up. I don't know if we have a technical problem. If they say, we prefer not to turn it on, I guess you kind of have to abide by what they're saying. What I'm going to show you down the road is our virtual mock interviewing tool, and you actually end up recording yourself. So I think it'd be a really good practice tool for that, so you can see how you're appearing to them. That's true. Yeah, you can see what you're doing.
You can't see it through your
It's really hard when you can't make eye contact with them. Yeah, but I think you just kind of have to go with what they're saying, and again, speak slowly, clearly. And I should have mentioned that, yeah, so Skype is kind of an emerging technology, and we do have a room in our office you can reserve for that if you prefer not to do the Skype interview at home, or you just want a nice professional room you could go to and be in the zone. And I'll show you how you can reserve that. So that's a great question. Did you have another one?
Appropriate, again, if you're in a Skype interview and you want to look up something on the internet, you can type, and that's actually less distracting than taking a pencil and writing, because they can see you do this, whereas if you're typing, you're sort of engaging. Is that, I mean, I don't think there are protocols yet, but is it appropriate to Google and take notes while typing a Skype interview?
I would probably avoid doing it. I mean, you could test it out with someone else and see if it's not that distracting, but I would just worry that they would think you're doing something else, on another website. Yeah, I think if you're going to do it, I think you would kind of want to tell them, like, I'm actually going to be taking notes while I'm doing this. I think I'd probably still do the old pen and paper, old-fashioned way, if at all possible. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Actually, I just want to comment on that. I've been on phone, not interviews, but just phone like telecons where people are typing and you can just hear it. So I think that might happen on Skype too, which is definitely distracting and kind of like.
But is that more distracting than writing where they're watching you work, right?
Well, I guess you'd be writing in a normal interview too sometimes.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think I'm guilty of this too. Sometimes I take too many notes, and really in the interview, try to just write down a couple words that are gonna, jog your memory. You don't want to be writing verbatim everything that they say, because you really do want to keep the focus on making the eye contact and keeping up with the conversation. But I'm definitely guilty of that. Because when I get nervous, I just want to take notes and keep my focus on that. But those are some really great points. So, how many of you have had a Skype interview? Okay. I think it's going to take off, in the next, a couple years ago we were saying Skype interviewing is the new thing. It just hasn't totally taken off yet, but it really is starting to. So you'll just have to see whether you have a phone interview or Skype interview, on-campus interview. But keep in mind, we do have that room in our office available if you'd like to use it. Yes?
Where's the best place to find information about the company interest? You have mentioned LinkedIn, LinkedIn plus just information. Is it some newspaper?
Kind of a mix. First thing I would do would be to go directly to their website and just spend a lot of time on the organization's website. Almost every organization has a pretty good website nowadays. Look at their mission statement. If you can see the organizational structure, usually there's recent news and trends that they'll have on there. Then I would just say doing Google searches. I'm going to show you a couple sites at the end that are helpful for salary negotiation that would also give you company information. And then on LinkedIn, you can follow companies and get some pretty good information that way. LinkedIn, I think the value, and we're going to talk more about LinkedIn in a little bit, is where you can find out specific people that you're going to be interviewing with. You can see how long they've been with the organization, where they worked before, and so you might be able to find connections that you have to kind of work that into the interview. But I really think I would spend the majority of the time on their website, really knowing as much as you can. I've been in interviews actually where they almost gave you a quiz based on what was on the website. So luckily I've done some research. But with the internet, with that tool, I think the expectation is that you're going to know more about an organization than in the past. So I would take the time to really prep. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I have another question. Is it okay on interview to oversell yourself a little bit, overstate your skills? Because it's the tool to get the job and not get the job. Right? Or you gotta be realistic.
Yeah, it's kind of two things here. Yes, you do have to brag a little bit. You don't want to sell yourself short, and I know that can be kind of culturally challenging sometimes to say, yes, I did this, or you can say, yes, I did this as part of a team. But you don't want to oversell to the point where you're saying you did something that you didn't do, because when you get on the job, you're not going to be successful. But don't be afraid to talk about your accomplishments and about the value added. This, we increased the attendance of this event, or this program is the way it is because I was able to contribute this, this, and this. But you don't want to say that you're fluent in this language if you're not, because they may test you on it, So it's kind of the happy medium there. Yeah. Uh-huh.
This might open up a whole can of worms, so if it needs to go, if we need to talk after or something, that's great. But this is in regards to the references discussion. If you're like vague acquaintances with some of those rock star people that really could bump your application to the top of the pile, how would you suggest in terms of reaching out to them in a way like, you talk to them almost never, but here's a place where if asked for help, they might actually be very willing to do so, but to not be so sort of cold about in the sense like, I need your help with this, even though we've never really talked before. I don't know, how would you broach that?
Exactly. I mean, I think depending on how much time you have to build this relationship up. I mean, if there are ways that you could help them out, they have an event coming up that you could go to, you could support them at that event, or that project you could volunteer at to help them in some way, or if there's any way you can set up just a brief time to chat with them about their research or about what they've been doing, and then kind of towards the end of that you can talk a little bit about yourself, So, again, showing kind of a reciprocal interest in what they're doing, and then try to reel it into kind of your future and how it might relate. And then you could still have them on the reference list, but maybe they're listed third or something like that, with the first number one person being the one that's really your closest contact, that really knows what you're capable of and what you can offer. I think, it's always tricky, and how I see this a lot with undergraduates too, because in a graduate program, you're in unique positions where you're in pretty small classes, but undergrads, especially at a big university, have the problem that a lot of times they're in big classes, and they have some trouble, especially as freshmen and sophomores. They're like, who can I put as a reference, because I haven't built very strong relationships yet. So I always encourage them to say, take advantage of office hours, and look for any opportunities that you can to try to build those relationships, to be proactive that way. So, yeah, great question. Okay, we're going to go ahead and talk about salary negotiation, but there may be time at the end we can talk about a few other good questions as well. So when it comes to evaluating an offer, so you've gone through this interview, you've done a great job, you get the call that we all are dying to get, we would like to offer you this position. So factors to consider: salary, but I would also say benefits. I think people tend to be looking for that number, and sometimes the benefits are a little bit overshadowed by the number. Benefits can add up to $7,000, $8,000, $10,000 a year. So a job with no benefits in a different salary, you want to do the math to see where it all kind of balances out there. You also want to think about opportunities for advancement, skill development. If you come in this position, are there going to be ways for you to move up very quickly because of the graduate degree that you have? Also think about location. Is it where you want to be, or is this the job you want, but geographically you don't really want to have to go there? Personalities of supervisors and coworkers. These are going to be people you're working with every day. Management style, organizational culture, even work schedule, travel requirements. But then I think more than anything, just the gut feeling. Does this feel right? I think we've all been in a situation where we're not totally sure it's the right fit, but sometimes you interview and you just think, this is the job for me. I don't know what I'm going to do if they don't call, because I know this is the right fit for me. So that gut reaction after an interview. So salary. Typically, it's not discussed in the interview, and it's left for when you've been offered the position. That's not to say that it doesn't happen. I especially see this happening in the interview, sometimes with nonprofit organizations. Sometimes even before you get to the interview, the nonprofit or another type of agency is going to ask you about salary. They want to see if you have realistic expectations. Sometimes private sector as well. So ideally, this is not going to come up until you've been offered the position. And if they don't bring it up, I would not bring it up until they've offered you the position. Because you want to wait until you're in the position where they want you. You're the number one candidate. You're going to be in a better position to negotiate once they've decided you're it. So if at all possible, wait to that point where they've called you. If asked during the interview, you can try to push it off a little bit. I hope to receive a salary that's in line with my experience, my education. I'm sure that it will be fair. I expect to kind of be offered the range that's consistent with someone with my background in terms of education and experience. But if they keep pushing, you want to be able to give them a range. So I would say if you think there's any possibility in this interview that they're going to ask you this question, go ahead and do the research, and I'm going to show you how you can do the research to develop this range, because you really do want to give them a range with kind of what you want to be more or less in the middle there. And then sometimes you could also turn the question back on them and say, well, what would someone starting out in this field with a master's degree and 2 years experience, what range could be expected for someone with that background? More than being asked in the interview, I've seen it be asked up front in terms of a salary history or a salary requirements request. And again, I've seen this big time with nonprofits. Given the economy the way it is, they want to know that you're not expecting to make $250,000 and work at a nonprofit organization. So if they ask for a salary history request, it's usually a separate document where you're listing the positions that you've had. You could say like salary history at the top. But I give context because I know a lot of you may be like a graduate research assistant, and yeah, you're getting $1,200 a month, but that's including free tuition. So you want to give the context for it, not just the number figure. I've also seen it be the case where I've worked with international students, and they were paid something that was consistent with, it was an average salary for the country that they were in, but it wouldn't be, that amount wouldn't translate well over here, you know, so you could put wording in there to show that it was consistent with an average salary for that time and country, that time and place. In terms of salary requirements, you know, you do want to do your research, give a broad range, sometimes going slightly above what you think it should be, but state that you're open to negotiation. That's usually going to be in your cover letter, where you put that in. So if they say salary requirements, I'd put that in there. In the cover letter, salary history, I'd make it more of a document. If you're applying to the federal government, your salary history is usually built into your resume. On a federal government resume, you usually list a bunch of stuff you'd never put on a private sector resume, salary being one of them. So that's kind of how that information is gathered there. So there are really the three P's to negotiating salary. Really, preparation is key. You know, knowing the company culture, the location, your market value, and also your personal needs. You know, what kind of loans do you have? What kind of expenses do you have? What do you need? Poise is really important too. Again, you don't want to reveal your requirements too early. You want to be confident, enthusiastic, positive, and take time to consider the offer. That's totally fine to accept an offer. They expect you to take usually at least 24 hours to think about it. But then you want to be professional. You want to know the dynamics of the situation. Do you have other offers? Is this your dream job, or is this maybe your second choice? Look at the benefits package to know, is this a top-rate health plan they're offering, a top retirement plan? Know where you're willing to compromise. And with this last one, I would say know who you're negotiating with, because it really varies among organizations, among industries, who's going to call you to make you the offer. Every time I've negotiated salary, it's always been with my direct supervisor. So the person who I now work with every day was the one who called me to offer me the job, and we talked about salary. So knowing that, you know, I'm not going to say that you shouldn't stand up for yourself and negotiate, but if it's going to be someone you're working with every day, that's probably not the person you want to haggle with over $200. Versus some industries and companies, you're going to be doing this with an HR person that you may never see again. And I'm not saying that you should be rude, because you should always be professional and demonstrate the 3 Ps, but it's a different dynamic when this is an HR person that you're negotiating with. So take that into account as well. The other thing I would say is, I don't know if this will make you feel better, but it makes me feel a little bit better. I don't think you're going to miss out on tens of thousands of dollars in salary negotiation. You may miss out on a little bit if you sell yourself short, but realistically, I don't think an organization is going to get away with you saying you'll work for $30,000 when everyone else is working for $50,000. I used to think about it and think, they'd be so happy if I came in and said I'd work for a low amount of money because I just want my first job. But from an organizational standpoint, they can't have someone making $30,000 when everyone else with that same amount of education experience is making $50,000. Because people talk, word gets out, State institution like this, our salaries are published every spring, you know, so they're not going to let you get away with a huge, dramatic difference in salary. A small one probably, not a huge one. Just to give a really personal example of this, my husband just got out of the Air Force after 9 years, and so in the military, you don't negotiate salary. You know, there's a fixed salary rate, and you don't really have formal interviews. So he, with his first private sector job interview just a couple months ago, he interviewed and called him, offered him the job, and said, let's talk salary. And so I told him, okay, you want to do your research, just like I'm telling you today, do your research, give him a range. And so he got back to them with a range, and I honestly thought he was going way too high, and I was nervous because I thought they were going to say, sorry, that's way too high. But no, they came back to him and they said, actually, we can do a little bit better than that. Take another 24 hours, do more research, come back to us with a higher range. So he did, and he's making more money. So if it makes you feel better, I don't think they're going to let you completely lowball yourself. You might miss out on a little bit, but big picture, they're going to want you to be in a range because they have to, the well-being of their organization has to go forward. Again, if you completely say too high, they're going to tell you to. I'm sorry, you know, unfortunately our budget is not going to allow us to go quite that high. Why don't you do a little bit more research, come back to us with a slightly lower range if that fits with your needs. So they're going to keep you on track. Yes?
So what you're saying kind of surprised me in that they won't shoot back at you with a number. They'll say, basically go reevaluate this and then come back.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the employer. I've also been in a situation where they've said, let me just tell you the absolute highest I can go. And then, you know, that's probably what you're working with. So, yeah. But I would say they're probably going to give you a range, and then kind of based on how off you think you are, that's the size of the range I would give. Usually I would say $4,000 to $5,000 for the range. He went a little bit bigger for the range because he felt like he had really underestimated. Yeah.
For your sort of the minimum that you would be willing to accept, should you just take that and like add $5,000 to it so that like, you know, how much of it is true haggling or how much is people, I mean, I guess it depends on the sector, but you know what I'm saying, like, wouldn't everyone always want the higher most part of the range?
Exactly. You know, and you've got to, when you give the range, I would have what you want and need to kind of be middle but towards the top. Yeah. And, you know, in a lot of times, a lot of positions, they're going to say the hiring range for this position is. And then you can kind of know. I mean, if they're saying the hiring range is 48 to 52 and you're coming in, you have everything that they're looking for and then some, you're probably in a good position to go for the very top of that range. But if you're coming in, they've offered you the job, but you have like 3 of the 5 major things they're looking for, you're probably not in the best position to say the highest number. So you can kind of do the math that way. Yep, in the back of the black sweater.
There is a major relocation, like going from East Coast to West Coast. At what point do you bring that up, or do you bring it up, or do they bring it up?
That's a great question. So I would, that kind of goes into the benefits, I would say. And so again, that's another way. If they're saying, wanting to talk about salary in the interview, I would say, you know, before I give you a range, I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about the benefits package, including relocation, if that's appropriate in this position. Yeah, because that can really add up to several $1,000s. Great point. Yes?
I ask because I literally don't know this, but for people who are coming out of graduate school, say with educational loans, do employers ever make offers to say something like, we can help pay for some of your educational loans as part of the package?
I do believe it does happen sometimes. Sometimes it could be formal based on the employer. I know the federal government, there are some agencies that in addition to tuition remission will slowly pay back any loans that you have. I've also seen it in the educational arena too with school systems, like in high need areas. So I think that would be something you could talk about. I feel like that's something that would probably show up on the website that if you saw it, that'd be a great question to ask in the interview. Yeah, great question.
Just wondering, if I requested a salary too high, for example, 20% higher than their upper limit, is it possible they just rejected me?
I don't think so. I mean, if you've gotten to the point where they've offered you the job, you know, and again, this is why you want to defer it as long as you can to the point where they've called you and said, you are our candidate. If you've gotten to that point, I think as long as you have the 3 Ps and you weren't saying, I want this amount of money, you're being professional about it, I think they're going to say, unfortunately, right now we can't offer you that much. Here's what we can offer you, or research it, come back to us with a slightly lower range. If it's in the interview, I think that's why you don't want to talk about money at all, if at all possible in the interview. But if you're in the interview, you probably want to make sure you've done your research and be a little bit more cautious with it, I would say.
Still, that doesn't hurt. Perhaps a little bit higher salary. Looks like it doesn't hurt.
Yeah, again, I mean, you don't want to say you want $100,000 when realistically the going rate's going to be more like 50. You want to be within a range. And again, then think about, okay, say they come back to you and say, the best we can do is $50,000, and you just know you need a little bit more than that. You can talk about benefits. Sometimes there's a little bit more flexibility with benefits offered. Or you could say, what's the availability, say a year down the road when I have my first performance evaluation? Will there be opportunities to possibly increase salary based on a strong performance? Because I know I'm going to deliver that in a year. So you can kind of see what might be coming down the road too. For some of you in the audience, this is going to be a moot point because you're applying to the federal government or a school system or something like that, and there's pretty much a set salary, and you're not going to have to worry about this. But for others of you, this is going to be something. But again, I don't think it has to be quite as daunting. But again, if you've done the research and you've practiced even saying how you would say it, you're going to be more confident with it. And again, this is where a career counselor can help too. You can always come to us and explain the situation, and we can try to help you walk through how to handle it. These are great questions. Okay. So when they've actually given you the number, just some psychological tricks you can do here. You can repeat it. Stay silent for 15 to 30 seconds as you think it over. You want to make sure you're understanding the total benefits package. So again, relocation, is that included? What's the health insurance? What's the retirement package? You can ask for at least 24 hours to think about it. Now, maybe you're in the situation where this is not your dream job. This was like second place job, and you've already interviewed with the first place job, and you're waiting to hear back. You can ask them and say, how much time are you able to give me to think this over? I want to make sure I make the best possible decision for, the best possible mutually beneficial decision, how you want to say it there. Maybe they can give you a couple days, so I would ask them what's appropriate. Sometimes they'll say only 24 hours. Sometimes there's more leeway there. Then you want to actually get the offer in writing. And if they don't put it in writing, that's when you want to put it in writing yourself. Include things like your job title, start date, hours, schedule, salary, benefit information, so it's all documented in a letter. Most times they're going to have a contract that you sign or some sort of formal letter that you're going to get. So some final salary negotiation thoughts. You really don't want to bring up the salary again unless it's requested by the employer during the interview. Try to push it as late as you can in the discussion. Don't disregard the value of benefits. Do as much research as possible. Be professional and positive. Market yourself. And this goes for, so even once you establish whatever salary it's going to be, think about a year from now when you're in the position and hopefully you're having your really positive performance evaluation. If you're looking then to negotiate a slightly higher salary, demonstrate and document how you've helped the organization. They're going to be more likely to give you more money if you can show them the value added that you've contributed over the 6 months or the year that you've been there. So that's thinking down the road. But walk away if it's not the right fit. Again, I know the job market is tight, but you don't want to take something that's not the right fit, especially after you've been in school, as long as you've been in school. And again, you don't have to say yes right away. It's acceptable, more than acceptable, to take time to think about it. They're not expecting you to accept on the spot. Some of those fringe benefits that we talked about, everything from health insurance, dental insurance, stock options. Some organizations will pay for your gym membership, some tuition remission, parking. So just know the full package and kind of do the math and see how it's going to benefit you and factor that into the number or the range that you're thinking about. Okay, some good resources to check out. PayScale would be probably the one I would spend the most time on. Glassdoor and Salary.com as well. I'm basing this on the fact that I put in my own job title, and I seem to get more realistic results from PayScale. So I don't know if that's just me. But the other thing I would say too is sometimes these come out higher than yours will be, because a lot of times they're looking at the average. And so if you're fairly new to the field, keep in mind that this may be a little optimistic. So maybe look at what they have there, dial it back a little bit based on your amount of experience or your education. And within Careers for Terps, our site, there's a NACE salary calculator as well. So I thought it'd be really, oh, yes.
I want to know anything about the benefits that companies offer. Is that available online, and is it to that detail where they, like there were a few examples that you gave me, does it say everything online, or do they have a sheet at the interview that they're going to give to you when you look over it? Or?
Yeah, most of the time it's going to be online. With an organization like the University of Maryland, most universities, government agencies, it should be online. If not, they may give you information at the interview, or I think it would be appropriate to ask. If that's something that's being built into your negotiation, if you could say, I'd just like a little bit more information about the different health plans available. But typically the information is going to be provided in some way in pretty good detail. So you can compare, like with health plans, a PPO versus an HMO and all the different acronyms and letters. But yeah, it's okay to ask. And with some companies and private sector companies, a lot of private sector companies will talk about their benefits because they're kind of bragging about how good they are. But if not, HR reps should be pretty knowledgeable and able to tell you about them. Yes?
Vacation in advance. For example, traveling is very important to me, so only having 2 weeks vacation is a deal breaker for me. And I don't want to go through this huge process with people that is a waste of my time and their time. But when you ask this question up front, then you do a great job.
Yeah, I think a lot of organizations do spell it out, and they say, this many number of days of annual leave, this many days of holidays. If not, I think before the offer. Yeah, I think if you were in the interview and you were kind of talking about benefits, and you could say, could you tell me a little bit more about the benefits that are offered? And then when they talk about annual leave, and just, and say, I'm just curious because I've had jobs where it's been broken down, annual leave, sick leave. I'm just curious how it plays out at this organization. I would try to not have that conversation until pretty late in the game, just because, like you said, you don't want it to sound like, I want 1 million days off. But I think if you can kind of couch it in a way, just you're more looking for information. Yeah, I think it kind of depends on how many actual days off. I think most organizations are going to give you 2 weeks, and then you just want to know like how much over that is going to be. And depending on the industry, you can probably guess how much it's going to be, more or less within a range. And we can probably give you some guidance on that too. But yeah, I would say bring it up at the interview, but with caution, and not just saying like, how many days off do you give us? Again, with the 3 Ps is the way to do it. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What would be the job I imagine myself applying for after graduation is almost definitely not what I want to do, but I need to pay bills. And so while I figure out what I want to do, I'll be doing something like this. Do you know which industries allow for side jobs? Or are some of those kind of your work class can have outside activities that could contribute?
Yeah, so that would be something to think about, like conflicts of interests, or sometimes there would be like non-competition agreements that you have to sign. I think those would be the things to watch out for. But I think that is something that you could kind of talk to them, and say, do other employees sometimes seek other opportunities outside of normal working hours? I think you'd want to stress that you can meet all the hours that they're looking for. You can meet those needs, but if there's something that you want to, like a passion you want to pursue, you could frame it that way, and you don't have to tell them that I have like another career passion. But I think frame it that way. That's how I go about it. You know, and that goes along with the ideas of like professional development and asking them, if you do want to stay with this organization, what programs are available or in place so that you can grow within the organization. Organizations love to hear that. They want to support you and help you move along with them. They don't want to lose you after they train you. And they know that that's a real problem. So if you can kind of show that initiative and interest, that goes a long ways. Okay. Come back here. I wanted to briefly touch on the UM graduate survey. So our office does this poll every May and December looking at graduates. And I thought this might give you some confidence in hearing this. So this was May 2011 grads. About 75% said they were in the first choice activity. And I mean, this is given the economy the way it is. And I think it's only gotten better, in my opinion, in terms of the hiring uptick I've seen through our office. Some of the top industries that were referenced, and most reported 2 job offers. So I was surprised by that. So most had another one that they could kind of be compared off of. Now, I showed these salaries with a word of caution. So this is masters and PhDs combined into one. So if you're in the master's degree side, probably a little bit lower, and your PhD side maybe a little bit on the higher side of things. In some of these fields, we didn't have that many respondents. So, you know, it goes with a grain of salt. But again, this was from some of our May 2011 data. Okay, and we asked, how did you get your job? So some of the top ways, some were already employed with the office. Maybe they were in grad school part-time, or they maybe turned an internship into a full-time position. Others used our online job site, other job sites. Networking played in here, contact with friends and faculty, some career fairs, so you can see. Now this is all on our website, actually. You can get to it. I'll come back to that in just one second. But I did want to say something about rejecting an offer. Okay, so after everything we've talked about, maybe it's a salary that doesn't fit your needs, maybe it's the benefits that don't fit your needs, or maybe you just don't think this is the right fit for you. With people reporting 2 job offers, all of them rejected another offer. So how do you reject it? You want to express your appreciation for the offer and for their confidence in you and for giving the opportunity. You want to say something positive about them, and you want to be diplomatic. You don't want to burn bridges, because maybe 5 to 10 years from now, this is the organization you want to work with. So you just want to make sure you've tied up all the loose ends and maybe conclude your interactions with a really nice email. One other just quick story here. Don't burn your bridges if you don't get the job either. Maybe you've come in second place, and I'll say this very honestly because I came in second place for a job. That's the whole reason that I'm here. I actually came in second place for a job of like 300 people, and it was down to like 2 of us, and I came in second place, and I was so mad and upset. And but I was diplomatic. I thanked them profusely for the time that they gave me for the interview, and I really enjoyed meeting with all of them. And that's when they said to me, actually, have you heard about the job at Maryland? I think it'd be a great fit for your background. I actually know someone over there, and I'll really recommend them because we were really impressed by your interview. I hadn't heard about the job here. And if I had just, once I got that rejection email, if I had just deleted it and if I hadn't followed up, I wouldn't have heard about this job, or I wouldn't be here. So it's so hard when you get rejected and you've gone through the interview process and you're drained, but keep the communication up because if you've gotten to the final round of an interview, they like all the candidates. They're just looking for the one that's the best fit. So it's not that they don't like you if you get to the last 3 or 5. So keep that connection going. It's really actually kind of like networking at that point. So I would just, that's something to keep in mind too. Along the lines of networking, real briefly, I know we're running out of time. I want to just show you LinkedIn. How many of you have a LinkedIn account? A lot of you do. Okay. I would recommend spend some time on it and learn about some of the bells and whistles on here. Again, you can research companies on here. I don't want to remember the password. You can research companies on here, people that you're interviewing with to see kind of their connections, the process that they've taken. It's also good to have LinkedIn because it usually shows up pretty high in your Google search results. And a lot of organizations do search for you on the internet to see what they can find. And this is a really nice professional thing that tends to show up when they search for you. Something that you might not be aware of, and because all of you are graduate students, how many of you went to Maryland undergraduate? Okay, 1 or 2 of you, but the rest of you have another entire institution or more, 1 or more institutions that are also alma maters. So if you go to contacts, add connections, alumni, this was changed pretty recently, and I think it's really neat how they've done it. So you can now see where people work, what they do, and where they live. And I point this out because especially if you, like me, went to a small school undergraduate, really great to tap into that at this level. And it's good to tap into this if you went to a large school as well. But I mean, I know most of the people showing up here because my college had 1,900 people. But this is great. So if you know there's an organization you want to work for, say you'd love to work at Google and you just want like the inside scoop on how can I make Google find my resume in the sea of resumes that they get. See who's on here who works at Google, shoot them an email and say, we went to the same college and I see you work at Google. How'd you get your job there? What advice can you give me? That's where I want to work. Or you can do it by field or by location, and here you can sort by DC. Now, my college was in Minnesota, that's why there's only a few people here. If you pull up Maryland on this site, DC has thousands of people. And it sorts to the 2 or 4 years you were there, depending on the degree. So a lot you can do on LinkedIn, and again, it's a nice professional place on the internet for you to present your qualifications. And there's a lot more, that could be a whole workshop in and of itself, but just so that you know it's there. Some other sites you might want to think about using, again, depending on your field. Twitter can be used for a professional job search. Now, if you're going to do that, you want to make sure it's separate from your personal account where you're tweeting different things. But that can be a really good way to connect to maybe some articles that you've written online. You can connect it to your LinkedIn page. Maybe you're connecting it to a blog, if you have a blog. Again, depending on the field, a blog can be a really good tool. I work with a lot of communications, PR, journalism students, and a blog can really make them stand out from the pack. And if you're applying for a job where blogging is going to be part of your job, you really want to have one. And I think there are a lot of ways you can really get noticed out there nowadays having a blog. And again, I'll use my husband as an example. In that gap of time between the time he got out of the military and when he started his current job, there were a couple months, and so he started a blog on movies just because he was bored and he loved movies. He was not even trying to find any sort of job, and a national blogging site found his blog, asked him to be a reviewer of films, and then asked him to screen movies for a film festival. He was literally not trying at all. So I think if you have some desire, you could try to use it on a blog for job search purposes. Again, you just want to keep it professional and focused. Okay, very briefly, just to see if you're making the most of the services of our office. How many of you have a Careers for Terps account? A few of you. Okay, so Careers for Terps is our job and internship search database. Thousands of opportunities in there, and there are opportunities in there for grad students as well. Again, depending on your field, maybe not tons and tons of things, but that's why if you set up a search agent within Careers for Terps, you can have it so it will email you only the newest things that come in within your parameters. You could have them emailed to you every day, every week. So that can just be a good way. You're getting those emails and you're not proactively having to log in every day. Think about making an individual career assistance appointment. We also run a lot of fairs throughout the year. Last week was our large spring career fair. We do it in the fall as well. You'll still be here in the fall. And we have boutique fairs as well. And I think sometimes grad students don't come out to those smaller fairs in such large numbers. But I think at a smaller boutique fair, you could really stand out with your background. So we do everything from I run a language fair every November if you speak another language. We have a public health one. We had environmental sustainability last week. Architecture's coming up. Geography's coming up. Criminal justice is coming up. So depending on your field, check those out. We also do a lot of panels in our office, and these are my favorite events. So these are when there's a table set up in the front, and typically 6 to 7 professionals will be on it talking about their jobs and their organizations, and then at the end you can network with your resume. So we do a federal government one every semester. International development is tomorrow night. Public health is coming up, creative and performing arts, and biotech and life sciences. And we do different ones every semester. We also do on-campus interviews in our office, so you can always check Careers for Terps. Once you have an account for that, you can see which interviews you might qualify for. And that would be your first screening interview right in our office. And then the program I was telling you about, virtual mock interview. So right on our website here, this is where you log into Careers for Terps. And I have a fake student account as a history major, which I was. Oops. changed my password to something that's really hard to type. So, okay, so on the main screen of Careers for Terps up here, these are a bunch of different programs that we have, but virtual mock interviewing, this is the tool that I was telling you about. So you just have to have a webcam on your computer. If you don't have a webcam, you can use that room that we have for Skype interviews to do this type of mock interview. You click on Conduct Interview. Go back. It's going to make me do that. Okay. Well, what it's not letting me show you is a section where it says pick your 10 questions. So you can pick from literally 1,500 different questions. They have all the specialty industries in different folders. So if you're an engineer, you can go into that folder. You can go into chemical engineering, and you can drill down and find the specific questions. Then they have the general ones that tell me about yourself. You pick your 10. You just hit start. A woman pops up on the screen, asks you each question, and you have 2 minutes to respond. And then you play it back at the end. And you can watch yourself. You can see if you're saying you know, all those words we tend to say when we're nervous. And then you can email it to a career counselor, your parents, your friends, anyone you want to give you feedback. And you can take as many interviews as you want. So it's a really good tool if you want to practice some of the things that we did today, or maybe you want to do this and then do a mock interview in our office. But this is like your first step. So really recommend you check it out. It's just in Careers for Terps. All you do is set up an account if you don't already have one. And you can always use Careers for Terps after you graduate as well. You just have to convert it to an alumni account. So just know that that's there. So that's pretty much it. So here's my contact information. Again, our website is careers.umd.edu. Were there any last questions that you have? Yes?
I got an email this morning that said there's going to be some sort of an interviewing workshop tomorrow,
Mhm.
or like speed interviewing or something. Can you talk more about that?
Exactly. I'm glad you brought that up. So every semester we do mock interviews that are done by employers. And so that's happening to be tomorrow. So this would be a great chance for you. I think there might still be some slots open, but if not, you could do it next semester as well if you're here. You sign up for a slot in Careers for Terps, and you have usually about 20 to 30 minutes with actually an employer volunteer doing the interview. And then they'll give you feedback at the end.
So they're not
So-
representing any particular position or opening when they're interviewing. It's just more for them representing an employer.
They'll sometimes they'll use the questions they use in an interview, because these are people who do interviews every day for hiring.
Okay.
So sometimes it's a good networking connection too. So yeah, we call it the mock interview clinic with employers.
Okay.
So but if you miss that or it doesn't work with your schedule, you can always do a mock interview with a career counselor in our office,
Oh.
just one-on-one. You just schedule a one-on-one appointment.
Okay.
Any other last questions? All right, well, thank you so much, and I hope you'll follow up, and we'll see you at some events soon.